Now, Shaun is a Plankholder, and I want to be very clear because there was a YouTube video where it was the title, and I think maybe just for the SEO, it says founding member of Tier 1 Joint Task Force,
That's
2.
right. Good man.
And
Good eye.
yeah, it's not accurate. And we're not stating that he is, and he never stated that he is, but I want to get into that afterwards because I like the way he responded to a comment. But if you are looking for a show today about combat stories, war stories, this is not it. I think those are all great because they're entertaining and also for the preservation of history. I think they're great for that format if, you're speaking to someone who's telling a story that is very rare. Today, I actually want to talk to Shaun about mindset and his philosophy on life. I mean, Miyamoto Musashi. I want to talk about how he got to where he is and where he is going. For example, his separation from the military. Is he the same person? Is he constantly evolving? Where is he headed? So that's what the show is going to be about today. Shaun, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, listen, I really appreciate you having me. And one of the reasons that I'm on the show is just simply the way that you introduced me. You introduced it thoughtfully and intellectually, and there was a lot of layers in that. So I appreciate you thinking about how we're going to do this show. Thank
you, man. So we know where you were, and now you have separated. How long have you been out so far?
So I left JTF-2 or Tier 1 Special Operations. That's in Canada in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And I haven't served in the military since I left Tier 1.
Now, getting into, you have had a long story career, I'm quite sure. And you had a presentation that you had submitted to me, and it was Everyday Warrior Mindset. And I found it to be extremely fascinating, extremely helpful to those who want to get into the warrior mindset. You really have developed your own view on the teachings of basically legendary samurai warrior, which is Miyamoto Musashi. Everybody knows this character through books, through movies, whatever it is. How did you get that? I mean, what is your driving philosophy? What is your driving principle? Did you discover that in high school? Did you discover that in the military? How did you go in that direction as I wouldn't say follower, but someone, an admirer of some of his tenets?
That's a good question. And so I wasn't aware of Miyamoto Musashi until I entered into the military. And it would have been right about the time that I was in 2 Commando. There was a lot of warrior discussion at that time, and I just bumped into his book, Book of 5 Rings, and it just I've got a dog-eared copy that it looks like it's being dragged through the entire world, all the mud, all the water, all the sunshine, and it's kind of a beat up copy. But that was in my rucksack or in my gear pretty much for a lot of my time in the military. It didn't always go with me, but it bounced around with me a fair bit. And then when I got out of the military, it just managed to somehow hang around and be part of my life. And so I've thought about Miyamoto Musashi for quite some time. One of the reasons that he resonated with me is because I feel like I was born a warrior. And I'm going to maybe get into that in a sec, because it sounds like it's kind of a flare out for some people when you say, I was born a warrior. It sounds dumb to some people, but if you were born it and you felt it and you understand what I just said, then this isn't freaking you out. You're nodding your head and saying, yeah, I get it, bro. I was born a warrior as well. But again, I'm going to get to that in a sec. So I've felt it, and I wanted to connect with people who I also thought were born warriors. And so throughout my military career, I started looking for characters like Miyamoto Musashi who I could learn from. Now, as it turns out, I started martial arts just over 40 years ago. And so Miyamoto kind of worked for how I considered combat and how I considered martial arts. And so he was always in my back pocket, not just for the way to live life or not just because he had a warrior mindset, but as the martial artist. Now, here's the interesting twist. So I didn't think I'd ever be able to study Miyamoto Musashi more than just academically. But as it turns out, just last year, at the end of the year, my wife and I went on a 7-week tour to celebrate my 60th birthday. And I got to pick where we're going to go kind of thing. And so we went to Australia for a week where I was supporting or coaching 2 Canadian national athletes who were competing at a 24-hour solo world championship. So, given that I've raced lots of 24-hour solos and I was a world champion myself, once I checked the box on helping them out, we jumped immediately on a plane, like right after the race was done, and punched over to Malaysia for a month, then into Singapore for 2 weeks. My wife wanted to do the Singapore marathon, which she, again, checked that box. And then, bam, we were into Japan for 2 weeks. And so I never thought I'd make it to Japan. And I've always wanted to go to Japan. For some reason, it felt like it was out of reach. But bam, there we are in Japan celebrating kind of like I've hit 60, which I never thought I'd make it past 30. So it was like a big deal to me. And I wanted to experience 2 things. One was to go up to the Nakasendo Trail, which is generally considered the samurai path, or the walkway of the samurai. And that is because samurais used to travel up and down the Nakasendo Trail with the royal contingent, and staying at all these little key post villages along the way. And so we stayed in a little village that historically was one of the spots that samurais would stop. We stayed in a ryokan that was historically there to support samurais as part of their journey. And so I experienced the Nakasendo Trail, and along the way, is that your feedback or my feedback? Can you hear feedback?
No feedback at all.
Okay, sounds like there's some feedback kicking up at your end, maybe. So we did the Nakasendo Trail, walked along the pathway that Miyamoto Musashi and his clan would have walked, and then got to Kyoto and went to the various areas that Miyamoto Musashi dueled. So at one point, I was standing in arguably one of his most famous duel spots on the edge of Kyoto. And it was the moment that he was fighting the 3rd member of the most famous sword fighting clan in Kyoto. And it was a 12-year-old boy. And how that played out was the head of the clan, which was there to support the emperor as the leading sword fighting school. He dueled against him and beat him. Dueled against the 2nd in the clan, beat him, killed him. And then the 3rd challenge was from the 12-year-old, who was the next in line for succession. And, he spoke up, and the clan said, it's on our terms, and it's going to be a night duel. And so as I was standing there in that spot, that night duel spot, imagining what historically played out, which was Miyamoto Musashi felt or thought or believed that he was about to get done wrong. So he showed up early, and as it's reported as up to over 100 members of the opposing clan showed up with muskets and pikes and axes and swords and all the gear, showed up to ambush him. He counter-ambushed them by jumping out of the bush, chopping off the head of the 12-year-old, and then fighting his way out of that spot that I was standing on, using for the first time double swords. So his long sword and his short sword. And he fought his way out using double swords. And that was the start of the sword fighting art that he became most famous for, the 2-sword style. And so standing there at the inception of the moment that Miyamoto Musashi kind of became a legend was quite powerful. And so I just tried to vibe with the moment. I tried to feel what Miyamoto Musashi was feeling. I tried to understand the moment as him. And to some degree, I felt like I experienced a certain connection with the moment, more than just pulling out my phone and taking photos. And so I've studied him for a long time. I've traveled specifically to try to experience walking in his footsteps, which I did. And now I'm left with this thought. At about my age, at about 60, Miyamoto Musashi flipped his script from warrior to artist and engaged in calligraphy, engaged in writing. And he went from a warrior poet or a warrior philosopher, if you will. And he only wrote his book right about the time he was my age. And it was only kind of in the very last part of his life as he was sick. And so he hermited up in a cave, decided he was going to leave something worthwhile for everyone behind him, wrote it, and then not quite promptly, but very shortly after, died. And so it kind of woke me up to the fact that I've lived a fairly full life. I've certainly been around a lot of rad people and learned a ton from them. And for some reason, standing there in his footsteps, I thought maybe it's time to start capturing some of the things I've learned in life and try to put them out to people. So that's why I wrote that.
It's wonderful, actually. If you guys get a chance, please go and spot her up and read it for free. It's a free copy. Check it out. It's very insightful. Now, to me, the warrior way is to live in the moment, to be present at that moment, to live deliberately, and that there is no wasted thought, no wasted action. When you were growing up and developing as a young man into the soldier that you were, how did that play out for you? Did you have moments where you knew that there was a shift in your thinking? I know for a lot of people, it would be the first moment they're in combat, or perhaps it's going through a grinder, a graduation from boot camp or whatever you guys would call it, some event, some seminal event. For you, did you know that there's a progression in your life? Did you journal it? Did you chronicle it? Or were you aware of it as you were growing to a young man into a seasoned warrior, as I would say you are, someone who is very accomplished as a veteran and now doing some other things that are probably going to be just as good?
Yeah, so good question. And I'm glad you asked it that way because as I stated, I was born a warrior. And how do I know that? Because my mom says that at the age of 5, I was telling everyone that I was going to be a soldier. That's just how I felt. That's just what I was. And one of the interesting things about feeling that way and then knowing that's what you are deep inside for the rest of your life is you just can't turn it off, no matter what. Like if you're serving one day and then the next day you're now a veteran and everything's in the rearview mirror, there was no switch for me to flick and think, that's it, done being a warrior. So I was born it. And I've felt it for a long, long, long time, as long as I can remember. So and I was born in the United Kingdom. I was born in England. When we moved to Canada when I was 10 years old, we moved to a fairly remote part of Canada in Alberta. It's a place called Grand Cache up in the mountains. And it's the Rockies. And it's tough terrain, man. Little mining town of 3,500 people in the middle of nowhere. To get to it, you had to drive down a gravel road for a couple of hours, and it was a dead end road. And so, by the age of 11, I was grabbing my fishing rod and going out fishing by myself. And then by the age of 12, I had my pellet gun. Well, I had a BB gun first, then I had a pellet gun, then I had my 22 caliber, a Ruger 1022 with a Bushnell 4-power scope on it. And I've shot thousands of rounds through that thing. It was really common for me to nearly every day grab my 22 cal and head out in the bush by myself. And I mean, in the bush, like within 5 minutes of leaving my front doorstep, I could be lost and no one would know where I was. It was deep, deep Canadian bush. And I was pretty comfortable in any season of the year. In winter, in minus 40, I'd be in my sometimes running shoes because we were pretty broke, but running shoes, a pair of ratty jeans, all the cotton in the world, and heading out in minus 40 and just tramping through the knee deep snow with my 22 cal, hunting rabbits or hunting squirrels or hunting anything that moved. Goonie bird, it didn't matter. Leaves, if a leaf fell off a tree, like in late fall, like I'd be trying to shoot the leaf in the air. And so I loved shooting. I loved tracking. I loved the bush. I loved becoming so aware in the bush that I felt like I was the bush. And so I could sit down, squat down in the snow, in my jeans at like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age. Didn't matter what.
Mm.
I loved squatting down in some snow and becoming invisible to the trees around me and nature around me, and just absorbing it all and figuring it out. And again, if something moved, if it was a rabbit, it was going in my bag for my buddy's cats. And if it moved and I thought, now I'm going to track it, I'd let it go and I'd track it. So I was becoming a outdoorsman at a very young age. When I did join the military, once I got out of high school, I joined specifically with the infantry in mind, because I was looking for the hardest thing to do. And at the time, that was it. And so I joined into the infantry with an already pretty good understanding of the bush, how to move silently and undetected. And as it turns out, I was a pretty frickin' good shot, better than most. And so my youth set me up for my military career to some degree.
Now, with that, as you developed, as you evolved, some people, they dabble and they get into many different things. They try out chef, they try out, doctor, they try out whatever. It maybe a medic or something, and they say, well, this is not for me. They go into the military, 3-4 years, they're out, and they say, it wasn't for me. But for you, you definitely knew. And with that in mind, what was the best takeaway that you had? Was it the people that you met? Was it the instructors that you had? Was it the experiences? Some might have been quite dangerous. Some maybe was in the classroom, but they were so good. What was the best takeaway for you out of all the time that you had?
So I'll just speak specifically because it'll be relatable, because almost everyone who's in the military has gone through some form of basic training. And so after basic training, it doesn't much matter what you become, whether you become a cook or a sock counter or a sniper, or it doesn't matter what you become. Pretty much everyone goes through basic training. And so as part of the presentation that I sent you, I broke it down in two ways. One is I was born a warrior, and so I never had to learn what it feels like to be a warrior. I've always felt it. But what I did need to learn was how to physically execute against that feeling that I was a warrior. And I didn't know how to do that. I mean, as I stated, I did lots of hunting as a kid, but that did not make me feel like I was fixing a bayonet on the end of my rifle and I was a legit infantryman, as it were. And so as I grew up, I was doing my best to get in the game, but I didn't understand the game. So when I joined the military, I was 135 pounds, skinny, and definitely underperforming. Now, the reason I was an underperformer before I joined the military was because in high school, it just didn't vibe with me. High school didn't work for me. I thought in a different way than the teachers taught. And I understood things that others didn't understand. And I didn't understand things that others understood. And so it's perhaps I had some neurodiversity. It doesn't much matter what I had or didn't have. All I can say is school was freaking boring, man. Teachers bored me. The pace bored me. The material bored me. And I wanted to be anywhere else but in the classroom. I wanted to be out hunting with my 22 cal. And so towards the end of high school, my brother, we were both bullied pretty hard for quite a while. And so my brother just couldn't take it anymore, and he committed suicide. And so my last bit of high school, I was already struggling in high school with the boringness of it. But then with that happening with my brother, and I didn't see that coming. No one did. It was quite an ambush. And so when that happened, of course, my interest in school, kind of nosedive even more. So when I was entering into the military, again, I was 135 pounds. I was underperforming in high school, and I thought it was kind of dumb. because teachers would be telling me like, you got to work harder, you got to blah blah blah, you got to, and just nothing was working for me. And it's not that I'm dumb, because my IQ is apparently 147, which is genius. I just didn't know how to use it then. Now I've learned how to use it. And so entering into the military, what I wanted to be is not what I was. Inside, I was a warrior, but the shell that I was and my ability to execute against what I wanted to be was pretty much zero. So what did I take away from basic training? What I learned was observing others. I realized that I'm not that much of an underperformer, and I'm definitely not an overperformer, but I had some context of the pipeline that I was in. I could see who was doing it well and who wasn't doing it well. And as it turns out, basic training was great for me because it gave me structure. Someone would put a challenge in front of me, and I would be sinking my teeth into the challenge like it was the most important thing on the planet. And as soon as I realized that you stack up the problems in front of me, you give me the time to solve it, I love this game. So I just had to start understanding the game that Shaun liked playing within the military, and then playing the game that I enjoyed. I'm not saying it was easy, but it attracted me to the game that I'd created in basic training. And so basic training taught me that I actually wasn't that much of an underperformer, and I wasn't that dumb. So in a course of 6 months of infantry basic training, I went from someone who had like almost no personal value to someone who thought, man, I can shoot pretty freaking well. I can kick a bit of ass. No one's kind of keeping up with me on this, and this. I think this might be for me. And so basic training gave me the confidence that I needed to punch forward into the future and start hammering it out of the park.
I always said, it's the most beautiful thing when a man knows forever who he is. And some people just don't get there. They don't know. They go an entire lifetime. And then again, the missed opportunities, which is they believe that they are meant for great things, but yet the opportunity, that door shuts, they get injured, they drop out, they can't finish it. And they go their whole lifetime thinking, success was back there and now I'm nothing, I'm nobody. Did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome? I don't think you did. And also,
yeah, oh yeah,
oh, you did. Okay, let's talk about that. And
like
and also,
110% imposter
really?
syndrome, an
Okay,
extra
so
10%.
And also, how do you work? I mean, I know that I work on negative affirmation, which is you suck. You can get to that extra. You suck. Keep running. You're going to do it. And some people say you're the greatest. You're going to make it. Keep going. Me, it's like, hey, you yell at me, I'm going to go and work harder. How do you work? What's your rhythm? How do you get your rhythm? But let's talk about the imposter syndrome first.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got wicked imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Lots of people who know me just shake their heads when they look at the things I've done or the titles that I've got or whatever I've accomplished in my life. They just shake their head when I can't own it. And I can't own it because I don't feel like I deserve it. That's how much my imposter syndrome is. Like, I've got to have a cork board next to me. And I just looked at it now and thought, oh yeah, I guess I've done a few things. But other than occasionally paying attention to my periphery, like, I just don't think I'm that big of a deal and that I have to work harder. And so I didn't even know there was a thing called imposter syndrome until a while ago. And I just simply said to the person, oh, that's what it's called. I've been like fighting that most of my life, and I've had to flippity flop the script on it. I've had to turn it into a lever rather than a wall. And so I'm sure you understand this. What I have to do is whatever the problem is in front of me that I sink my teeth into, I don't believe that I can do it, though I know it's already done, because my track records demonstrates that once I think it's done. If I make it important, it's freaking guaranteed 100% complete. But my imposter syndrome doesn't allow me to think that I'm capable of doing that. So it acts as fuel to like freaking turn the rotary dial up to 11. It gives me afterburners. And so, if not for my imposter syndrome, my velocity might not be as ferocious as it actually is.
Now, I'm not a behavioral scientist nor an evolutionary psychologist or anything, but for you, do you think that that perspective came from a sense of disconnection, localized, that you didn't feel a part of your family or your community, your high school group or something, and then that's why you went hunting? Do you think that's everyone experiences that, or was it? Do you think it's just a few people experience it and experience it very badly, and that actually, like you, propels them to do quite good?
Well, it's a good observation and a good question. And the best way for me to answer that is to relay what I've heard many times over from other people that have been on our podcast who also suffer from imposter syndrome. And as it turns out, quite a lot of tier one guys or special operators, it doesn't much matter what branch they're from, certainly with high level Leos as well. It's not uncommon in tier one for most guys to suffer from some degree of imposter syndrome. And statistically, it's been demonstrated. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. Is psychological profile of an operator with Dr. Aya. His name will come to me. He did an excellent podcast where he discussed the several thousand special operators that he put through a profiling system in the United States to understand if what they were all about, what made them, and et cetera. And so after several thousand, he started forming patterns, and he was forming patterns and kind of doing, light bulb moments like, bing, what? How come nobody has ever realized that pattern before? So we'd bounce back and start from square one and work through the pile again to see if what he was kind of seeing was actually reflected in the data. And it was. And so he's got a number of takeaways from the podcast. And one of them is that most tier one guys suffer from some kind of pretty bad imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I can believe that. I really do. I mean, we know that just because the variable of success goes up doesn't mean that your sense of self-worth goes up with it alongside
Correct.
it. It can actually
Correct.
drop down. And,
Correct.
I've heard even with musicians, rock stars who get on stage, the adulation, the love that they get from the audience, that energy. And then once that show is over, that energy is gone. And they're always going for that higher high. They get into these drugs or whatever they're getting into because they want that. And at the same sense, they're always feeling like a failure. So, there's this sense that we are of some worth, this feeling that, we are of some value, and yet there's no evidence, no proof to show that we are. Or the opposite, right? The converse. And that is that you feel like you're unworthy, but there's so much evidence that says, no, my gosh, you have accomplished so much. Come on, man. So let me ask you, I mean, for someone who has come from your background, your role, the units you've been in, the things you've done, what do you think is the most crucial trait that someone needs to accomplish the things that you're accomplishing?
Easy. Stubbornness all the way. That's what I describe it as. Whenever someone asks me this question or in a similar vein, my immediate answer is stubbornness. And so I'm just freaking stubborn, man. I don't care if it's impossible. I don't care. I'm going to stubborn my way through to it's now possible. And so my job is to understand what's being asked of me. And so if someone says, we need you to save the planet, you've got to become an astronaut within the next 2 years. Well, frickin' break out the astronaut suits, boys, because the planet needs to be saved. So if it's important, it's done. And like, as I'm shooting towards the moon, even if I'm not fully qualified, I just need someone in my ear to tell me which buttons to press, and I'll be pressing them. And so I'll get it to the moon, I'll turn it around, and I'll get it back and save the planet. And then I'll ask everyone to just leave me alone for a week or two, and then it'll be the next thing. And so I don't mind sinking my target lock onto something that is just probably not doable, but I stubborn my way as close to the finish line as I can. And so along the way, I'm going to fail a good jabillion times. I don't care about that because I've failed so many times that I kind of like it. I kind of, I do honestly. Because if when I'm failing that much back to back, it lets me know that I'm on the right track. It lets me know that my pace is right. Because I don't like playing it safe. I like, kind of playing on the bleeding edge or on the fiery edge. And I don't mind rubbing up against it and getting a few scuffs along the way. So my way is pretty ferocious, and it doesn't mean that my calibration initially is correct. It's rarely, if ever, correct, which means that I'm going to bump into some things and fail enough times that I recalibrate, and I'll fail my way to the finish line, or I'll just keep failing as close as I can to the finish line. And I've been doing that a long, long time. And it's through the lens of when I sink my teeth into something, I obligate myself to a 10-year project. Because if it's not important enough to do for 10 years, then it ain't important enough to do for one day. That's dabbling. And I consider myself a scrabbler. So you're either a dabbler or you're a scrabbler. And I'm a scrabbler. I like to go down the rabbit hole, scrabble my way down as deep as I can. In fact, I like to scrabble deeper than anyone has ever scrabbled before. I like to get somewhere where there's no footprints in front of me, where there's no hand scrabble marks in front of me. I like to kind of do it where nobody's done it before. And so it doesn't mean that I can or will or have. I'm not making any claims. I'm just saying that's the way I'm wired. And so I'm not a dabbler, I'm a scrabbler. So I need to assign 10-year projects for my scrabbling. And I mean, using mountain biking as an example, I just finished my ride, today's ride, just before I came into this podcast. And I'll be putting the footage up about that a little later today. And everyone will get to see what I did on a bike today. And I've been riding bikes since, I don't know, coming up over 25 years, I think. That started out as kind of a 10-year project 25 years ago. Same with coffee roasting. That started out as a 10-year project nearly 20 years ago. Same with all of the little things that I get into, all of the fascinations, the tangential stuff that it makes my life rich. Maybe not the core of my life, but the rich edges of hobbies and pastimes and sports and fascinations. I don't dabble in those. When I pick up a book, I don't dabble a book. I scrabble a book. And so to me, my way of life requires me to long-term to commit to anything. I hope that makes sense.
It makes so much sense to me, and I completely agree with you. I think there are a lot of dabblers, Rupert Brooke, he said, I want to, kiss 1,000 girls, drink 1,000 pots of beer, write 1,000 poems, sing 1,000 songs, go around every single corner, just in excitement. And he just doesn't know what's around that corner, but that's that youthful energy I think a lot of people miss out on, and that they commit something. Look at Baudelaire, or look at Fitzgerald the writer, or Hemingway. Any of these people, they didn't dabble, they got into it, and they took losses too to their career. These are people who didn't dabble. They committed so much so that in some ways they were such great successes and yet failures in other ways. But for you, I saw General Boykin at he was giving a speech at the church I was attending, and he said, when I get down on my knees and face God, I'll have my spear in one hand and my shield in another hand, and I'll be bowed and I'll be bloody, but I'll say I've done everything I could do. And it was such a wonderful speech in that he committed everything. Do you have any regrets? Do you feel that you've accomplished everything that you've set out to do? And there's a third part of that. Now that you are not at that tempo, that pace, what's next for you? In other words, do you feel that you need to accomplish as much, but in a different way? So getting back to my question is, where are you headed? Do you feel like you've accomplished all that you need? Do you have any regrets? And what's next?
So absolutely not. There's things that I'm not even aware of that I've got to accomplish. Like that'll come around the corner. I'm a relentless adventurer. I'm a freaking pilgrim staring out to the horizon and beyond. That's how
I love that.
That's how I've lived my life, man. Swear.
Yeah.
I swear. I don't, it's not that I don't care what's around the corner. I'm looking forward to the thing that I might not want to see around the corner. I freaking love the corner of life. And I'll do it with my eyes closed. I'll do it blindfolded. Put me on a boat and spin me around 3 times, and and make me seasick and then throw me off on a desert island, if that's the adventure for the next 10 years, well, freaking bring it. I love an adventure, man. And so that is no hesitation for me. In fact, it's actually a problem for me because I love it so much that I have to pay attention to Shaun, because I know what Shaun's like. And if I get a little too wild with my adventures, it's a 10-year adventure now. So, and you know, on that point, what regrets do I have? I've got a freaking boatload of regrets. And it's because I was dumb when I was young. I made all kinds of mistakes. When I was a young leader, trying to be a good leader, you're still trying to figure out how to be a young, good leader. And I wasn't a good leader for a while. I wasn't a good this. I wasn't a good that. I wasn't up to my standard. I might have been meeting the system standard, but not my standard, because I'm strict with myself when it comes to a standard. And so there's only two states of existence with the standard. You either meet it or you beat it, or you freaking beat it. And so I'm quite critical of my performance, and therefore I have a lot of regrets from when I was younger. Now, that said, as I started wising up, as I started getting more mature, as wisdom started seeping into my mature mind, which probably started occurring around the age of 40, I would say, when we had our first son, I was trying to figure out how to do life better, because up until that point, I got to do anything that I wanted, like kick immense amounts of ass and not have too much concern. But with kids coming along, I found that I tended to be more considerate of the larger world around me rather than the small world around me. And so kids taught me a lot. They've injected more wisdom into my life. And now at 60, I can look back and see there was a point in my life where I knew I had to do better, but I just didn't know how. And once I realized that I just had to go with a super simple mantra, and I mean, it's so ridiculously simple. It seems like it can't work, but it works for me, and it works for a number of other people that also do it. And that is just freaking do your best. Do your best. Do your best today. Just like I'm trying to do my best in this podcast right now. I didn't show up like as a knucklehead thinking I'm going to give it 40%. I showed up. I'm in the game. I'm doing my best during this podcast. And once the podcast is done, I'll have zero regret. If I say something dumb 3 minutes from now, or if I've already said something dumb 6 minutes ago, no big deal. I was doing my best. So there isn't very much regret in that. It's when I show up and half-ass something, then I've got all kinds of regrets. I'll be sitting in my rocking chair at 80, looking back on the half-assed it moments. That's the stuff that'll chew me up. And I know that to be fact because I've experienced it lots. The moment that I stop half-assing things, whatever. Failure, no big deal. I gave it my best. Tomorrow it'll get my best again, and it'll get solved tomorrow. So that's kind of how I approach those kind of things. And then the third piece is what's coming up. Dude, great question. I mean, if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I had any interest in speaking in front of a microphone, my answer was this. As soon as I finished shooting snot out of my nose from laughing that hard, it was this: forget about it. I have zero interest in that, which is exactly what I told a lot of people for a lot of time. But then a number of people were kind of poking and prodding me and hassling me to get in front of the microphone and just become a little more public and just try to put some more wisdom out there and try to wave that flag, try to support, try to et cetera. And I just kept shaking my head and saying, nah, I like riding my bike. I like drinking coffee. I like hugging trees and eating granola, and I like being left alone. I've got a pretty good life right now in the shadows. No one really knows what I'm up to, and that's just good with me. But one of my two key friends, Seb Lavoie, who you are very familiar with, who was on your podcast, the Slavage Commandage, hit me up and started hassling me and getting his Jedi mind tricks all up in my peanut. And so the other guy, Tim Turner, Army Sergeant Major on Instagram, who I worked with in 2 Commando and the PPCLI, also a sniper. Tim's a great guy. He hit me with a video call one day, and I thought I was going to escape all of this microphone stuff. But he hit me with some simple questions. And it went along the lines like this. Hey, man, do you know what's going on in the Canadian Armed Forces right now? No, not really, buddy. Like when I left Tier 1 and I watched the barbed wire go backwards in my rear view mirror as I was driving to my next job as a civilian 60 seconds after I cleared the barbed wire, I stopped thinking about that stuff because I couldn't stay in the game. I couldn't exist in two locations, wanting to be doing the job I just left while trying to do the stuff that I've got immediately in front of my nose. So I hadn't looked at that stuff at all. And he said, well, we got a problem right now. The suicide statistics are bad. The mental health statistics are bad. And it's not just in veterans, it's also in currently serving, and it's also in first responders and Leo. He said, just do me a favor. Just look at the statistics for the next 24 hours and then let me know what you think. Well, he kind of screwed me over in a good way, but he kind of screwed me over because once I saw what I saw, you can't unsee that stuff, man.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of it. And then when I became aware of it, I knew that what I was just about to enter into was another 10-year project called frickin' podcasting, which I had the square root of zero interest in doing. And it was hellacious. It really messed with my head. I did not like being in front of a microphone. I did not like talking to the Eye of Sauron, as I used to call it, which was my phone, bungee corded to a tree up on my mountain biking trails, by the way, when I first started. It was ridiculous. An embarrassing, shambolic start that I have regret for. I just didn't know how to do it like I do it now. And so my apologies to everyone. And so now that I've kind of tightened things up a little bit, now that I've had more time in front of a microphone, now I understand what I'm doing. Things are easier. Finally, to my point, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. So for me, I've always served throughout my life, starting with the military and then through every career that I've had. And I think this is my 10th career. So all along the way, my central theme has been to serve. So now that I'm almost 2 years into this project of podcasting, that's just what I'm going to do, man. I'm just going to keep figuring out ways to serve my community through asking them, how can I do it better? What do you need? What else can I do? Calibrate me. What should I do tomorrow? What do you want to hear? Who can I connect you to? Just trying to figure out how to serve. And so I guess that's your podcast as an example. There's no freaking way I would have ever come on a podcast like this, even a year ago, because I was still trying to get my act together. I didn't want to drag down your platform with embarrassing nonsense if I didn't have my act together. And I just, at that point, didn't know that this is actually serving the community. You're serving your community by providing this opportunity, and I'm serving my community by thankfully accepting your opportunity. So I feel in this moment that I'm in the game that I want to be based on that's the game I'm told I'm supposed to be in. I recognize that good things are happening because I keep hearing it on the daily. So that satisfies my imposter syndrome to understand that my time's worthwhile in front of the mic.
Fantastic answer. And actually, thank you for leading me into the next question I wanted to ask, which was to go back to your brother and his suicide, which is the veteran community suffers so much, and even for law enforcement and people in general. I mean, everybody, there's so much angst in this world, and so it's great to bring good. But for you, is part of your existence an outcry against the injustice you suffered with your brother, which is, I'll show you, I am somebody. I am going to change the world. I will fight back against evil and wrong. Is your life is just, for some people that exist, and I don't think that's you, they are just existing and trying to do the best, but they are not very deliberate in that. They're just trying to figure it out. But some people are going straight to that cloud in front of them and parting it out and coming up with the answer on the other side, that darkness. But for you, and with suicide ideation and everything that's going on in the community, where do you sit with that? Have you put to rest some of the demons that you have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not that I look forward to talking about this or love talking about this, but I'm comfortable talking about this, and I know that it's important for everyone out there to kind of get various opinions or various experiences, connect minor wisdom to a certain individual, and then carry that forward, and then bump into another wise person with maybe a little nugget that might help them move through their moment. So for me, I've never had suicidal ideation.
Mhm.
And so, but I was pushed pretty hard as a kid with the whole bullying thing. And so, ironically, when it was three brothers that, used to chase me down a back alley, throw rocks, and I have big British ears, and I was a bit of a goofy kid. So they didn't mind kicking my arse and hucking rocks at me. And so now the ironic part is that, I went to the military. Basic training sort of squared me up. I went from 135 pounds to, about 165 pounds in 2 Commando. And, I remember jumping on my motorbike and driving back to my hometown, and parking my motorbike out in front of the supermarket and walking into the supermarket to get a snack. And I saw a dude who used to kind of give me a little bit of some aggravation when I was growing up. And I looked different, man. And it wasn't just the extra 30 pounds. I had a look in my eye. And I try not to flash that look too often. I try to keep it pretty chill. I try to be pretty, comfortable to be around guy. But when I target lock someone, man, it's got a certain, not twinkle in its eye, it's got a certain freaking laser beam in it. And so I looked at this dude and I thought, oh, look at you. And as he was standing up, he just started backpedaling. He backpedaled his way all the way to the back of the aisle and said, man, I'm so sorry about what happened. And Nike he's super apologetic, trying to hold his hand out as he was retreating. And I said, hey, man, don't sweat it. Like he wasn't the biggest culprit. And so I said, it's all good. Shook his hand and said, don't sweat it. That was a long time ago in my world now. I've moved on from that to some degree. So thanks for being cool about it. Thanks for apologizing, and etc. Now here's a funnier story. One of the guys who was like one of the prime characters of the three that was always whooping my arse. Many years later, after I'd left, I was still in the military. I'd just come out of 2 Command, and I had an even spicier glare when it was go time, and got introduced back to a place with some girls, and things were just starting to kick off, and I was in a room with a couple of ladies, and the door burst open, and the guy who burst the door open was one of the guys who bullied me, and it was his girlfriend who had invited us back to her place. She thought he was out of town. Wow. He came in, and so the door slammed open, and he said, what's going on here? And I recognized the voice, and I recognized the silhouette, and I freaking targlocked him, and I said, oh, and I said his name, which I won't say live. And so I pointed at him, said his name. The dude turned around and started running through the living room. And so, I'm not quite fully undressed at that point, but I certainly don't have a shirt on. So I'm sprinting through the living room, chasing this guy as my friend is sitting on the couch, watch me run through the living room. And this dude dived through the open window, 2-story window. And I got to the edge of the windowsill and looked down at the ground and just saw him hitting the deck and like splattering, and then standing up and kind of running all fuzzy off in a semi-straight line off into the horizon. Never saw him again. And fair play to him. He hit the deck pretty hard. So the good news is I would have hit him harder. So the gravity aspect of that moment was probably his best friend. That was the best choice for him.
Now, I see you as being a very polite or respectful person. And I know that when there are situations that may kick off with someone who's impolite, there's that switch that goes, and then it's on, game on. And I see so much of it as it's a facade for some people,
sure
where
is.
They're just polite because they don't want to kick this guy's butt, even though they can. And they're just, and now for you, is that your whole persona, which is the introspective, thoughtful, the expansive thinker, this intelligent person who is kind because you're kind. You don't strike me as someone who has a facade just to be polite, because you have to work through all the silliness of society. As you go to the grocery store, someone cuts you off in traffic or whatever it is. What is your personality really like?
Yeah, so I try to do better every day. I try to be a good human. I really do.
Yeah.
But I do have an edge, and it's an edge that just never goes away. No matter how I try to dull it down, it's always pretty sharp. And so, and I'm not suggesting that's because I train really hard. Like, as I said, I've been doing martial arts for 40 years. I've been on the BJJ mats for 8 plus years. I know how to handle myself. There's not too many people that I'm scared of. And there's definitely nobody in the world that I won't fight. I'll fight anyone at the drop of a hat. for the right reason. And I know I'll get my arse kicked, but for the right reason, I'll get my arse kicked. So it's not a fear of fighting, because I've done it a lot. My problem is when it's like, I do have an issue with injustice or with bullies. And so someone who's flaring out, pretending to be a badass when they can't spell badass. And so when they're up in my grill, cutting me off, flipping me the bird and all of that good stuff, like, I'm not going to lay a beating on anyone for any of that. But I won't let them, they're not going to get a free ride. It happened to me just recently. Guy flipped the bird, did his whole little routine, and it just so happened that I was parking real close to him. Not because I wanted to. It's just that was my spot that I'd already indicated. So I pulled in, and he's all flared out. And as I was walking towards him to say, "Hey man, what's your problem?" He caught the look in my eye and he deflared. Like, he went from oil can arms to like schlump. And I mean, he was like, "Dude, I just whatever, carry on, man." I didn't get up in his grill, because he went from giant to ant in a split second. And the reason being that he probably gets away with it all the time. His pattern is, he's a tough guy, but he's just never met any real tough guys. And so I'm not making a claim to being a tough guy, but I am making a claim to, you're going to get the look.
I believe that. I mean, they're just like target indicators, where you have the sight, the sound, the smell, whatever. Now there are other indicators that people give off, and you can just read someone if you do it enough times. You can definitely read your opponent.
For sure.
But for you, what do you think is unique about yourself? Is there anything that you can claim that, for some people, they really never test themselves, challenge themselves, and find out that they might be particularly good at something? Maybe it's a personal trait, or maybe it's a physical abnormality. But let's talk about personal trait. I mean, for you, what's unique about you? Maybe the way you think, maybe the way you accomplish something.
Yeah. I think that, and when I say unique, that isn't like the only person on the planet. I'm talking about like a small percentage of the human population when I think unique, not a one in a bajillion. So I think I'm unique in the sense of the way I think outside of the box. So it doesn't much matter what's going on in front of me. Whether it's a mountain bike ride, a trail that I'm shredding, or whether it's a problem, or whether it's a mission, or it doesn't matter what it is. The thing that's in front of me, when I look at it and other people look at it, I usually look at it different. It is a out of the box mindset. And so that's what makes me the happiest. That's where I create the most good, is looking at the world differently than the world looks at the world. And I know there's a number of people who also do the same, but it's rare. And so I suppose that would be unique. And the other aspect is, I've already mentioned it, I am just freaking insanely stubborn. I'm stubborn to a fault. It's got me in trouble for being as stubborn as I am. And so it's not like some sort of superpower where you become a Marvel hero just because you have lots of stubborn. There's another end to it as well, that, you're peeling potatoes because you're really stubborn. And so whatever unique tools I've got, I've had to learn how to wield them. Just like anyone else, everyone has unique talents, and they will only be of value to you once you learn how to drive them appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about mentors and tribes, or brotherhoods, whatever you want to call them, family. Clearly, we have our friends, our family, and familiars. What are your mentors like? Do you have mentors? So if you have a mentor, what are they like? And what's your tribe? I know that my tribe is very different. I may have some guy who's a friend who's an artist, and I have another who's a plumber and carpenter type thing, but they all have very similar personalities, and some very different. But for you, what is that like for you, your mentor and your tribe?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start with tribe first, because that'll help establish the mentor piece. And so because I've had a bunch of different careers, like as an example, I am a bit of a nerd as well, because I used to be a computer system engineer. I used to teach system engineering. And so with that silo in effect, I've got nerd friends. And so my interests in nerdery are more than most of my buddies in my other silos. So in the silo called the kick-ass silo, they're less interested in the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence that is just around the corner 6 months from now. They're just not interested in that stuff. I am, because again, I've got a silo called nerdery and kick-arsery and blah, blah, blahry. And so all out of the kind of 10 careers that I've created a number of silos. And then within those silos, it's not that I consider them mentors because I don't have a formal mentor. What I've got is friends who I just think they're smarter and better than me. I'm going to listen to them as much as I can. And so in my nerd world, I've got buddies who are more nerdy. In my ass kicking world, I've got buddies who kick more ass. So they're not mentors per se. They're people that I pay attention to and we bounce ideas off. And it seems to be a mutually beneficial two-way highway. I never check in with anyone and say, hey man, like I think I'm totally screwing things up. Can you throw me a mentor bone? I've never thought that way. I'll engage with someone in a conversation and do my level best to give them more value than they're giving me in the two-way highway. So that's how I think of mentors.
I'd like to see what your hobbies are as far as in the nerddom. So guys, if you go on his Instagram page, you'll see some of the artwork he's done using Midjourney. It's got a couple different warriors or ninjas sitting around a table with, the podcasting equipment with the mics, and it is so good. So that's great. And you've mentioned the Eye of Sauron, so I'm like, okay, what is this guy into?
I'm into all the nerdery.
That's Dude, awesome.
I think so. The way that you establish that is, you've asked the question about what interests me and who are my mentors. Well, I think that if I would have lived half a life if I could only give you one answer, because I feel like to live a full life, you have to live a broad life. Yeah, I'm trying to head for 50 countries now, and I'm not talking like it's some sort of bizarre little checkbox where I only spend a day in a country and it's like, yes, country number 39. That's just not my style. So I try to understand as much of the world as I can, as broadly as I can. And the interests that I have are broad ranging. And people would be surprised about some of the things that fascinate me. And so I just try to live a really rich, colorful, varied, adventurous, challenging life.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Let's get into some deeper and darker fare, not just because we want to do it for giggles, but really there are a lot of people who have a problem or a confluence of problems that strike them so hard that they take a lifetime to get through. It might be the death of a family member. It might be a divorce. It might be losing a job, losing a house, or all of those things. And for you, did you ever experience that confluence or one incident? And how did you manage that? What did you do? What are the takeaways for people who are struggling? Was it in the military? Was it in post or pre-military? And what did you do to get through that?
Yeah, so I've had to reinvent myself a number of times, and that's a difficult thing to do. So as an example, I was a warrant officer, which is a reasonably senior position in Tier 1 Special Operations. And so, one day I was wearing full black in my ninja outfit, and I was taking it off and putting it down for the last time, jumping in my car and driving away. And now I'm not that anymore. And I don't know what I'm going to be next. And so I was heading down to the Ontario Police College to teach as a use of force instructor, but I knew that I wouldn't be there permanently. And so I was there just less than a year. And then I found myself on the sidewalk in our nation's capital, Ottawa, walking down the sidewalk. And eventually I came to a crosswalk. The light was do not walk. And so I was standing there looking at the light, and a guy walked up next to me and looked at me, and then, immediately started checking his watch like he was about to do a marathon. And he didn't even know how to look at me, because when he slid up next to me, I just kind of, it's not that I gave him a Terminator 9000 look. I looked at him, scanned him, assessed him for threat, and then looked straight ahead because I thought non-threat. But it was probably the look I gave him, because I was still a little bit Terminator mode. And so in that moment, what I realized is no one around me knows anything about me. They can't understand what I've just come out of, because at that time our unit kind of formally didn't exist. We were that top secret that we just weren't known. And so he couldn't understand me. I couldn't freaking understand him if we would have struck up a conversation. As I looked around every citizen on that sidewalk, I just realized that they're from a different world than I am. And how am I going to engage in this, what I thought at the time, underperformance world? Because I was used to doing 1,000,000 miles an hour. And it felt like on that sidewalk, I was doing 1 mile an hour, as was everyone else, compared to what I'd just come out of. So that re-identifying myself or recreating myself, that was one of the hardest things that I've had to face every time I've moved into a new career, reinvention.
Yeah, it's very hard for a lot of people. And reinvention, a lot of people are very stubborn. They don't want to do it. It's too tough, you know. I know that you said you like science fiction. I don't know if you've ever read the book The Forever War by Joe Haldeman.
Oh, yeah, I have. Quite some time ago.
Yeah, it was the Vietnam War, his experience, and he was really writing metaphorically about his journey back home, and that after 1,000 years of space travel, everyone he knew was gone. They were dead. He could not relate. And the culture, the society had changed so much that every time he went into a space jump and came back, he didn't know what the hell was going on. The fabric of society was changed. For you, did you ever experience PTS, or what you guys, maybe PTSD, you guys call it, or PTS? Did you ever experience that? And yeah, you did. And then the sense of disconnection so much, you explained that you did, but in a way that, did you ever feel alone? I guess is the word, really. It's just that simply, alone.
For sure. I'll
okay.
Let me touch on one thing real quick, because I feel like I failed to connect the dots on it. So as part of the presentation that I gave you, and this is perfectly in line with anyone who's struggling on the stuff that I'm about to talk to, you're either born a warrior or you're not. If you're born a warrior, you'll end up in a warrior path. You'll end up on the warrior way. Whether you like it or not, you're just going to end up on it. That's who you are. That's what you're going to become, period. And then how you get off that, who knows? Whether you want to or not, who knows? But if you're not born a warrior, you can become a warrior. But that requires you to get on the warrior way, which is, as I described, requires a certain number of things like strength, courage, honor, focus, blah, blah, blah. All the things that I listed off on that kind of mandatory aspects of to become a warrior. The warrior way requires you to hit these things. Mm-hmm. So no matter who you are and what challenges you face, if you've never held a pocket knife in your hand as a wannabe warrior, you can become a warrior by focusing on adopting the warrior way, by starting to reinforce some of the things that are listed as mandatory attributes of what a warrior is. Now, that doesn't predicate or require you to ever hold a rifle in your hand to become a warrior. Anyone can become a warrior with focus and applying themselves. You can start living a warrior way life. And so now to your question, when it gets super hard, when people are getting lonely, when people are feeling like no one understands them, when they're kind of lost. The good news, if you were a warrior at one time, you know how to get yourself out of that. Just start becoming a warrior again. Start applying the warrior way. It will pull you out of your hole that you're in. It'll pull you out of the darkness. It'll pull you out of the loneliness. It will. Start being a warrior again, that you've probably forgotten how it is, but get back in that game again, and it's going to put you in a place where you're in a better place. And so when I was lost, I had to find myself, as we all do, like any pilgrim. Once you look over the horizon and you start walking, you're now in a strange land. And you've got to figure that strange land out. That is part of an adventurer's life. That is part of the warrior way. You never walk into a strange land and let the strange land own you. You own the strange land as a warrior. As for the 1,000-Year War, as you mentioned, in Tier 1 Special Operations, the tempo is so fast, it could be 1,000 years of lifetime crammed into a career. And so every time your velocity is 1,000,000 miles an hour and you come back to 1 mile an hour, it feels like I've lived a several decade life in that career that probably exceeds 100. And so depending on who you were and how you lived and how you engaged life, it can feel a bit lonely once you leave that life. But it is your job to go find that life again, to go not conquer a strange land, but go adventure in a strange land. So what do I mean by the strange land? For me, one of the things that I started was I figured I'm going to learn how to like coffee. I hated Army coffee. I had to figure out how to like coffee. And so eventually I started roasting coffee. That's been near 20 years. I sell coffee. I used to own a coffee shop. I mean, I tried to figure out coffee. That's my job. I used to hate Scotch whiskey. I didn't know why I hated Scotch. One day when I had a break between my courses of computer system engineering, I decided, this is dumb, man. Why do I hate Scotch? And I bought a ticket, flew to Scotland for 2 weeks and walked moved my way down through the left coast of Scotland. Noon, I'd walk into whatever pub was open, put my elbows up on the bar, 2 seats down from the old man who was already there, and look at him and say, what are you drinking? So that's 2 weeks of Scotland that I tried to figure out who's drinking what, get them to maybe debate what's the best, figure out what I like, and then go back to Canada now as I've pilgrimed in Scotland with an understanding of what that strange land is, the strange land of Scotch whiskey, the strange land of anything. You can't navigate your way through a strange land without exploring, putting a flag down and at least using that as the point to launch into little day missions of exploration, trying to figure out more about coffee, more about whiskey, more about life. And so to me, the best thing anyone can do if they're in a dark place is refer back to the warrior way and start adventuring again.
Great answer. I really do like that. And I like that you have offered a solution. You know, you had me thinking of Stranger in Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. He says, I grok you. Yeah, so definitely. Great book.
Yeah. Actually, my favorite science fiction book of all times is Starship Troopers.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
It's so legit.
Yeah.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah, Rico. I mean, people have to read the book, not the movie, because what's funny is that
100%.
I don't remember the director. He wrote Soldier of Orange and directed that, but he was an anti-fascist, but he grew up in the Netherlands during the occupation of the Germans, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so he made the movie to ridicule, anyone that was pro-American or, that it was a nationalist, which people don't get. And that's why it was so, ironic.
Poorly received.
Poorly received. If they read the book, you realize that Heinlein said, no, man,
the book.
You got to serve. You got to,
That's right. And central to that, and I've said this in podcasts, I feel really strongly about that, man, that, society as a whole has just got a little bit soft. It's kind of lost its way. It's become entitled. It's forgotten what it means to earn your citizenry, earn your citizenship, earn being a good neighbor. And so Starship Troopers, man, puts that into context. You want to say something, you think you've got something important to say. How about you earn the right to say it first, rather than just spouting off like you're large and in charge? Go figure out if you are large and in charge. And then if you make the cut, now you got something to say, buddy.
That's very true, man. I could not agree with you more. Coming to the end of the show here, and you probably didn't stay awake at night with worry being in the unit that you were, but I mean, I'm sure you had many concerns. What keeps you up at night now? Now that you're out and now that you're doing something completely different? Do you have concerns with the political landscape? Do you have concerns with the global issues that we're having, or no concerns? Some people just turn off the news and they don't even worry about it. If it's important, it'll get to them. And if it's not important, then, hey, anything keep you up?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked it that way because I forgot to touch on briefly PTSD.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I've been diagnosed with PTSD. Whether I've got it or not, I don't know. But the clinical determination was that I've got it, and that's based on I used to have nightmares every night. And so, when I got out of Tier 1 Special Operations, we were kind of black boxed enough that like I just fell through the cracks. Like I didn't have a lot of paperwork done. There's a thing up here called Veterans Affairs Canada, kind of like your VA down there. I only just learned of them just about 3 years ago. So when I left the military, I had access to all kinds of pensions and programs and re-educations and all of that stuff. I didn't know any of that existed. I just frickin' got in my car and drove to my next task, which was to be a civilian. And all along the way, every single career that I've done, I've forged it myself. No one's ever held my hand. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I just kept on smashing. And so 3 years ago, I happened to mention to my family doctor, she said, how's everything? Good. I'd see her every year. And anything that you'd like to report? And I just said, I'm not sleeping that great. And my wife had encouraged me for quite a while to mention that to my doctor. I never thought it was a big deal. And so she said, well, why are you sleeping poorly? I said, just a little nightmare action. And she said, well, how often? I said, kind of every night. And she said, well, for how long? And I said, kind of over 20 years, I suppose. And my poor doctor. And so, and I'd been seeing her for about 12 years at that point, and I'd never mentioned it to anyone. And so she said, what? So, she started asking some questions, and I didn't get into any of the details, but, I guess some of the things that I said about, getting blown up or whatever, she just said, maybe let's just get this figured out. Have you ever heard of Veterans Affairs Canada? I was like, what? What's that? And she said, do you know that you've got access for these kind of injuries? And I said, Andrea, I've got a boatload of injuries. I didn't know any of this was solvable. There's money. And so I never chased down anything that I got from Veterans Affairs Canada. What I did do was I just said, okay, I'll submit myself to the system and see what the system tells me. And so they did an evaluation. A psychiatrist said, based on the nightmares, yada, 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 you've got PTSD. And when she delivered that news, by the way, I was in a video conference with her. She said, did you know you've got PTSD? Well, you do. And I just looked at her and I blinked about this much, blink, blink. And I said, good. And she said, what do you mean good? And I said, well, good. Now I know what it's called. I didn't know what it was called. When I left the military, PTSD wasn't a word. And it just wasn't part of my radar. And until she said it, I didn't think that I had PTSD. And I'm not sure I still do. Because the good news is, for anyone out there who's listening, is until I said to my doc I wasn't sleeping well, I could have been on a medication that stripped all of that problem away for a couple of decades. She said, why don't you just try this med called Prazosin, 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 which I'd never heard of, which apparently is the number 2 drug that's commonly handed out for high blood pressure. But it just tangentially has a little bit of an impact on nightmares. And so I said, I'm not a medication guy, but I'll give it a try. And so, dude, I popped my first tab. That night was the first time I hadn't had a nightmare in frickin' ages. Fantastic. And the following night, no nightmare. And if I take a Prazosin every night, no nightmare. And it works for my head because it's about as it's basically the equivalent of Tylenol or a baby aspirin. It's almost like no impact, except it strips away the nightmare. And so I get way better sleep now, way better. And so
that's great. That's great.
Dude, you know how important sleep is.
Oh yeah, sleep is so important. Yeah.
I've got an Oura ring on here right now. I've been wearing it for the last 6 years. So it's only been like near 2 years that I've been on Prazosin. And I can see my sleep, how trashed it was. My deeps, my REM, all my cycles in my sleep curve, just garbage until finally I could stop nightmaring. And so my sleep is great now, comparatively. And it is a great example of man, reach out to your doctor, even if you think that there's nothing that they can do for you. You don't have to turn it into a big deal. Just sit down and say, yeah, I'm just not having good sleeps, and then kind of break that out a little bit. There's tons of things that you can do to improve your sleep through sleep hygiene and blah, 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 all the things. I've got a million long list of how to improve sleep. But if you're having nightmares, perhaps there's solutions for you that you should check in with your doctor.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think a lot of these centers, the VA, they create programs or a process where a person becomes trapped in the system because they're relying on that, and rather than to get out of it as someone who's not a victim and who has a solution, and particularly when there's an exchange of health for money that they're getting paid out, right, with their claim. And I'm saying, if you have a disability and it's legitimate, it's great. I know so many people that I can count on handfuls, that I can count, who are getting paid, and they are playing the system, and they are being a victim as well. They don't want to get better. So that's a complex conversation, but
it's complex and it's important because
yes.
I struggled with it. And I struggled with it because for, 25 years, I didn't know that I had access to these things. And then when someone told me that not only do you have access, we're actually going to owe you a lot of money. I didn't realize that.
You're deserving of that, because
for sure. But I struggled with it.
Certainly.
I'm sure you've talked to lots of people who, when they're told that, they struggle to accept that.
Absolutely. Especially someone like you.
I turned it away.
Well, David B. Morris, he wrote a book called The Culture of Pain, and he studies pain from the ancient Romans and Greeks all the way up to modern times. He talks about hysteria in women, in the 1900s, 1800s. It just, and I found out a lot of these doctors were getting injured patients who were either from working class society, either Mexicans or Italians or whatever it may be. That's tough guy, you work, you don't complain, you just suck it up, you don't tell anybody you're injured, and you have to survive, and that's just the way it is. And I think that's probably the way it was with you with Joint Task Force. That
for sure,
you just did your job. You're not going to go and go boo hoo hoo and, hey, send me to sick bay and give me
no. That was not our style,
right? And I think that's a lot of the issues that, rather than going to sick bay for 30 days, right? And sitting in the squad bay, whatever it is, the barracks.
There's no way I want that on my medical document, because that means that I can't go do that thing tomorrow. And so that's a bit of a problem. But so here's something that is an interesting phenomenon from my perspective anyway. So when I realized that there was this thing called Veterans Affairs Canada, and that there was all this help available, and that, you're compensated for your service, I was struggling with that, and I said, okay, well, I guess, let's draw the blood, let's do the CTIs, let's do the CAT scans or the MRIs, let's do all the things. Frickin' let's go. So I basically got in a meat grinder lineup for nearly 2 years, and all the blood was drawn, all the fingers were stuck up the various spots, and so at the end of that process, I had 20 pages of injuries that I'd been working through for all those years, like super freaking chronic injuries, all the spine, all of the thing, the knees, the belt, all the stuff. And so within the Canadian Armed Forces system, or the Veterans Affairs Canada system, you get assigned a percentage of coverage for your amount of injuries. Well, at about 111%, I just stopped telling them that this is injured, because I'd blown through the 100+%. So many pages of injuries that I'd been working through all those years, and I still would. I mean, I wouldn't ever report an injury to anyone if it meant that I could stay in the game that I was in.
I would think a lot of you operators would never, just exploit the system, and it's just it's a resource. People, if you are here's a guy right now, right? Sean's telling you, if you are suffering, man, go get the help. Don't feel any shame about it. Ask for it, man.
Yeah,
get in line.
I agree.
Do it.
And you'll struggle with it. Like, if you're anything like me, I did it because here's a way that I had to spin it in my head, and it's because a few people gave me this advice, and I think it's righteous, man. It's not a trick. It's not like a little hack to get right with the program. I do believe it's righteous, and it's this: that you've got to accept those privileges. You've got to accept those supports because the generations before you died for those. Those things exist because good men and women died to create those systems for us. And so I look at it as on their backs. And there's no freaking way I'm going to disrespect that. There's no way I'm going to turn my nose up at their service. There's no way that I'm going to turn a blind eye to a system that was created to help those generations. It'd be disrespectful for future generations. So I'm kind of righteously, I believe, like supporting that it's the right thing to do, because I think it is.
Yeah.
So that others hear that message that if it's not just about you, then make it about the team. Normalize that you deserve the support that you're going to get that's going to make you a better human being, that's going to let you support other people who are also struggling.
Definitely. Well, listen, we're at the end of the show. Unless there's a question that I hadn't asked or a thought that you want to posit that, that's lingering in your brain right now.
No, I don't think I've got any questions, but I will state this categorically that if anyone has questions for you in the future that I can answer either independently or in another show, or if you come up with something, I'd be happy to jump straight back into it, because as is my way, I feel like we only got about halfway there.
Oh, I feel that we could have talked for 3 or 4 hours, man. So, but I've only got so much time, but I would love to have you back on again, man. You are such an interesting individual, and I think you are so transparent, and I really appreciate that. I know a lot of people have an agenda. They stick to the script. They either want to promote a product or something or promote themselves, and I don't get that from you, and I really, truly appreciate it. I don't just say that because I've interviewed some rock stars, and I consider you one of them, a guy who's well accomplished and out there giving advice. And the end for me, which I love, is that you are trying to bring good into the world. There's so much trash and garbage and evil and wickedness, and at the end of the day, there are guys like you that are out there fighting the good fight, and I really, really appreciate that. So
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, guys, please follow Shaun. I'm going to put his information down in the YouTube notes down there, so you can find him. Go to his website, the podcast that he's on, and everything else he's doing on Instagram and social media and whatnot. So please fight monsters, man. You are not alone. Stand up, speak up, fight back. God bless you all. Take care. Shaun, Peace. Don't head out. Yep. We're going to chit chat right after the show.
Sounds good.